everyone. Welcome back to the Standing in Our Truth podcast. This is episode 4. Can you believe it? My name is TJ, and of course, we have the lovely Richa. And Richa, why are you wearing red today?
Because it's Valentine's Day, Love Day, and apparently, according to the way it's commercialized in society, we wear red on Valentine's Day. I'm definitely feeding the whole tail scheme they have there. I bought myself chocolates. I mean, I've been married for 10 years, so I guess I'm happy to buy myself chocolates. I got some treats for my son's class, had him write his name on 18 cards and call it a day. So happy V-Day, all.
Happy Love Day. I also fell in the trap last night. I'm like Amazon priming anything that would make it overnight. And I got my husband a book from our unborn baby that says, I love you, Daddy. And I just totally fell into the capitalism Valentine's Day trap. But I think today's podcast episode is the ultimate act of love because we're talking about a topic that is heavy for me because it's impacted me personally. And I know that it's impacted you, Richa, personally as well. But there's just a negative stigma around it, specifically in our culture, in our society. And the topic is addiction. Some people think that it's a choice and why can't you stop drinking or engaging in unhealthy coping skills like gambling and shopping and, eating disorders is one. And we could talk a little bit more about that and pornography and sex. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the clinical background of it because that's Richa's expertise. And I'll share, of course, my experience with it, how it's affected me personally.
It's just perfect for Valentine's Day too, because it gets us thinking like, how do I show love to myself and what stops me from doing that? And how do some of our behaviors prevent us from fully loving ourselves? So with just the lens, personal lens, I'll dive into that later. And I'm excited to hear your story, TJ, and how it impacts you. And it's so empowering to see how you've dealt with addiction through your life and come out just such a strong, successful woman. Not that you weren't before, but you were able to unlock those handcuffs and come out and share the story with everyone. So I'm super proud of you on that. And with just the way we talk about addiction in a society, and I would even specifically say, for me personally, I've seen that it's so stigmatized in the Indian community and different cultural communities where it's something that we are able to control, that it's not that serious, that it's not as bad as having cancer. Like it's a choice. And I wanted to touch on just when we look at the actual definition of addiction and how people don't really understand it to that level. But if you funnel down, it's a chronic disease and it's compulsive and it takes both psychological and physiological effects on our bodies and how we attach to the world, how we deal with circumstances. And then there's harmful effects, not just to us, to others. However, we're unable to stop. And so I think that piece, the need and the inability to stop are where addiction, like the severity can go from high to low for individuals. But I've seen it on both ends since, we work in the field and we see people who have gone from treatment center to treatment center or like nothing seems to work, no medication. My favorite quote, which I like to say to families that they don't understand the disease or they're resentful to their loved one who's dealing with it, is that you can't break out of prison unless you know you're there. And I think that key, I've seen people successfully get out of it, obviously, like you and so many of my good friends who are so successful and doing great and realize that that's the key because there is, ethnicity or education or any person who is considered like they can't struggle with the disease and they're out of it. So it's a topic that I think is relevant to everyone in some way, either affected themselves or their family, or they're shopping too much or working too much or watching too much porn, whatever it may be. I think today's the day to talk about it. And I want to just hear your story, TJ. And I think it inspired me over the years. And I've shared it with loved ones that you've helped. So let's take it up a notch.
Yeah, let's take it up a notch. We like to be raw and real here. I'm definitely nervous to talk about it because I haven't shared as publicly as maybe I'd like to that I suffered with addiction. I found recovery late in my 20s and I've now been sober for 9 years. But when I first heard the term alcoholic, and of course, like you said, there are varying degrees of alcoholism. There are people that have high bottoms and end up in recovery, meaning they haven't lost their jobs. They, still have their relationships, still have their lives together. or the people that have low bottoms. I thought of the alcoholic as the low bottom person, who is that guy who's living under the bridge with a brown bag and they're 50, just drinking their life away, homeless. And I was definitely more of the middle to high bottom. Like, I hadn't lost everything, but I didn't really have much of a life at that time because it affected me so much. Thanks for introducing the topic and just looking at it from this maladaptive coping skill mechanism of addiction. It is a disease. You and I both know physicians, because we work in this field, that don't see it as a disease, which is so sad because they could be helping people. I know someone personally who's a physician, and he struggles with mental health and sees people that struggle with mental health as patients and thinks having a mental health disorder is harder than having an addiction. Part of me wants to prove him wrong and tell him that he's wrong, but that's not my place. That's not my job. My job is to show that, people do recover from this crazy disease, which is really a slow suicide is what it is. And it gets progressively worse. The mental health and substance abuse and addiction go hand in hand. In our field, we talk about what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Was it the addiction and you couldn't stop drinking or using drugs or gambling or engaging in sexual behaviors that are risky? Or was it anxiety, depression? Was there an event that happened that you found alcohol to mask? And for me, it was a little bit of both. I have always had a low level anxiety and depression in my adolescence. I've shared my story here. I never felt comfortable in my own skin. I was the chameleon type. Whatever you wanted me to be, Richa, I would be for that day. So if you wanted me to go with you all day and run errands, and would say yes to anything you asked me to do, because I just wanted to be loved and liked. I didn't have an identity. When I discovered alcohol, and it was around growing up, I mean, in social events and parties. When I discovered it in high school, when most people, dabble with it, and I remember having my first sip of a beer and thinking, oh my God, this is so cool. What a relief. I felt like this huge sense of relief come over me of like, okay, my inhibitions are down low now. I'm more funny. I'm more confident. And that's what I chased for a very long time. The partying culture was just a part of our growing up and going to college. It was Taco Tuesdays. We'd go out and drink and have tacos. It was Thursdays was like the drink tank, and Fridays. And I was always looking forward to the parties because, like I said, I always wanted to distract with something so that I didn't have to deal with the reality of the uncomfortable feelings I had inside. And I would do anything, even before I found alcohol, to suppress feelings, hang out with friends. I shared in the last episode, I would want to be out of the house so that I didn't have to deal with the reality of having to do homework or chores. And so I had this mechanism of wanting to distract and avoid from a very young age. But the alcohol and substances helped mask it to a whole nother level. And I love Brene Brown, and her definition of addiction talks about the maladaptive coping skill that leads to the numbing of emotional pain. And typically that emotional pain is driven by shame and guilt. For me, I had the anxiety and depression. So the alcohol helped me feel more relaxed. My thinking slowed down. I learned in early recovery when I got sober that it wasn't necessarily a drinking problem that I had. Yes, I was drinking too much, but I had a thinking problem. And what I did was find a pass out of that, and that was to drink. It helps me stop to think. So that was my tool. That was my solution, was to drink over the anxiety and the depression. And then there was an event that happened in college that was quite traumatic. And I won't share so many of the details, but I was taken advantage of. There was physical, emotional abuse. It was ongoing. And I felt so much shame from that I wanted to escape all the time. I used to say early in my recovery, I was addicted to escaping, didn't want to have to deal with thinking about those memories or thinking about what other people thought about those memories or that event. And I was constantly seeking any way to escape. And for me, the easiest way was alcohol. It had already provided this relief to me. So I knew it worked. Then it was this, like we talk about in our field, this dopamine reward seeking behavior, right? The reward that I got from drinking was that I didn't feel the emotional pain. And then I stopped thinking. So I was just chasing that reward. And of course, as you know, once you try to hit that reward system and that dopamine level over and over again, you're seeking and wanting more. Like you'll always need more. There's never going to be enough. I found out later on in my 20s is that I crossed an invisible line of drinking for pleasure and fun and to drinking for like, I need this. Physiologically, I needed it to help me with withdrawals. I needed it because I couldn't remember what I did the day before and I didn't want to have to think about it. And it became an unhealthy coping skill. And by the grace of God, and I have such a strong relationship with God these days because of the 12-step recovery model, but by the grace of God, my family found me help. And they tried so many times. They were worried sick about me. They tried every control mechanism to help get me better. But it wasn't until they realized and they engaged in Al-Anon and talked to a professional that like it wasn't their job to help me. I would have to find that recovery myself. The reason why I said I was so nervous about talking about this is because I hurt so many people in my disease in those times of my drinking. Lied, I cheated, I stole, I did things that are not who I am today. And I knew deep down in my core that wasn't who I was. That drinking made me into a monster. It was not who I was. I would never treat people like that. It was just all I knew. I found somebody who helped me find a recovery program. And now, of course, we do this as a job on a daily basis is help people find recovery. But somebody did that for me. And I've been sober 9 years and it is Richa, the biggest accomplishment of my life. Like we talk about checking the boxes, right? Like the job, the masters. Okay, we both want to go get our PhDs. We're just high achievers now because it's just another form of an addiction, right? My purest joy, and I think my mom and dad would say the same thing. I know my dad would say this, is to see me sober and to see how quickly I've grown and succeeded in this recovery journey. And it's because I was willing to get help and I said yes. I don't know why I said yes. I think I was just tired. They say sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I did the footwork. It's a lot of work. It's the 12-step world and Alcoholics Anonymous. It is not a walk in the park. You have to put in the action and the footwork to get the reward. But I had to admit that I was an alcoholic. And that was really hard. I remember hearing the word again, thinking there's no way I'm an alcoholic. That person is the guy under the bridge. No, I was. And this disease does not discriminate. Like you said, it affects so many people and so many cultural communities that it's not until we talk about it that we can really, that people can find. And so I know it's affected you personally. And I know that us sharing our stories with each other has helped us immensely. And I just want to commend you for sharing your truth today, too, because it's not easy for your family to hear these things as well.
It's been quite the struggle, talking about topics like these in, I would say, my close family, extended family, married family, all of it. There's still so much of a stigma, although so many people are struggling right in front of our eyes. And we just pretend that it's not as bad as something like, again, a medical condition where we can see it or it's, again, looked at as a choice. But I've struggled myself with coming to terms with the fact that, I can't change it or control it or fix it either for someone, even though I'm in the field and I know the levels of care and I know the steps and I have people that are my best friends in recovery and everyone is just doing these amazing things around me. That doesn't mean that I could take that and bring it to another individual who doesn't believe they're in prison, who doesn't believe they're actually struggling with a disease and that they think it's a choice and that they're choosing this substance. And this is in regards to, I would say, drugs and alcohol that I'll primarily touch on today in regards to how that has affected me in my life. But on another episode, one day, whenever we choose to do so, I will touch on how with addiction for me has looked like it came in the form of an eating disorder. And diagnostically, there's such similar conditions, addiction and eating disorders, that they have the same foundation, which is weak. We're weak in our foundation. We need to do something to make ourselves feel like we can't feel it. We're all trying to avoid that pain. And that's how it came up with me. And substances came into play too with weight loss pills and diuretics and all these things. In terms of just the AA and Al-Anon piece, I got permission from my husband yesterday before we were recording to ask him a little bit, about how his At least I guess I can say he doesn't like titles or, any sort of label either, like most people. But when I asked him for permission to talk about it, I asked basically if I could say how it's affected me and what I think it is and how I saw it develop. And so, TJ, you're one of the first people who I knew that was in recovery. Just didn't talk about this stuff with other people until I joined a program that's obviously focusing on addiction, and that's my current job. But I was similar to you with I grew up not really drinking. It wasn't really introduced to me until college because I went to boarding school. So there was no, alcohol, no access to it. And before that, so when I went to college, I had my share of, just like you said, the thirsty Thursdays and all these random days that were just excuses to get wasted and deal with a shitty hangover the next day. But, I thought it was literally like cool and everyone's doing it. It was so sad. It was like a basic textbook, like just doing it because it's fun. And then the one thing I didn't like about it, though, which might have saved me from going in the direction of addiction to substances, and pushed me towards eating disorders, was that I felt a lack of control when I was drinking. I did not like that I did not remember things the day before, or that I basically ate too much or whatever happened when I was drinking. I didn't like that. So it took me a while to realize when people around me were struggling with addiction to substances or other unhealthy behaviors. So in my marriage, dating and the whole beginning period of our marriage, the first few years, it was just fun. And we would drink and watch movies and just have romantic nights. It was great. And a girl in Al-Anon, a wife of someone who she was no longer with at the time, but she told me she understood and said that with drinking, it starts out as fun and then it becomes fun with problems and more problems. And then eventually when it becomes only problems, you know that it doesn't need to be in your life anymore. And so I had to make the active choice for, I would say it's pretty recent now, but to just like get rid of the, any sort of drugs or alcohol in my life. Not that I was super into it, but the way it affected me was through in my marriage. There was some red flags along the way where I started realizing that it became an everyday thing, or that it was happening to an unhealthy amount, or that things happened that, weren't remembered, and choices were made that were just detrimental to the marriage. And so I got pretty sick as well, as I learned in Al-Anon, because I tried to control the disease and I tried to buy breathalyzer after breathalyzer, and you would make fun of me and tell me to stop. But I was like, no, I need to know. I need to find out. And what was the point of it? I don't know. The sense of feeling like I could control it, change someone's decisions to use. Again, I was struggling with the fact that I thought it was also a choice that my husband was making. And I realized after many, many years and many struggles in our relationship that it was not a choice for him, but it was a choice for me to decide if I wanted it in my life or not. So watching you, TJ, and your success, I think you've seen my ups and downs with this, and tackle it head on and fail, totally get beaten by the disease and fall back into other things. So I've learned, with the steps of AA and the steps of Al-Anon, that, there's other methods, obviously, but those have worked for me, that I can't be the mother, the martyr, the manipulator, or the manager when it comes to this really chronic illness. And that's saved, I think, my life and helped my husband be pushed in the direction of wanting it for himself. I had to set boundaries and set major rules in our relationship where the marriage were to exist with the devil or without it. And we decided together that it would have to be without it. So that's where I'm at today. I don't know where he's at. I won't speak for him, but I do know that it's not my choice. And yeah, I hope he can be empowered like you one day to speak about it.
He will. And I love him so much. And through the ups and downs of your marriage and me laughing at you for buying 100 breathalyzers because my family did the same. And I joke with you about it, and we can joke about it now because you're no longer in that place of being addicted to control. Because like once you found one piece of evidence, him telling the truth or him betraying you in some sort of way, you would be addicted to finding out exactly what it was. And you would go down these spirals and these rabbit holes, and I'd have to pull you out and you pull me out all the time. But it's like that's what it is. It's this addiction to control. I've mainly been talking on this episode about substances and, in my case, alcohol. But there are many forms of addiction that we'll delve into a little deeper with the mental health and the substance use and them co-occurring, it is, like I said, a very progressively deathly disease. And there are many people that don't make it alive after being in the disease of addiction. And so I don't want to take this lightly. So if you know anyone struggling, or you just want to talk about your own struggles with substances or shopping, gambling, sex, whatever it may be that you're using to avoid or suppress pain, we are here to talk about it. We both are trained professionals that work in behavioral health that can help you get diagnosed and find treatment, and find your way to recovery. And this whole podcast is about standing in our truth. And while I've avoided this topic and I don't want to talk about this topic because it still brings shame, and I still can't stand it when I'm around family members and they're drinking and they're uncomfortable by it. Like I'm still not healed. Like I'm still not emotionally 100% sober. We talk about putting down the drink or the drug or whatever activity it is, but the real thing about it is the emotional sobriety and having a program or a spiritual power that can move you through the difficult moments of your family jabbing you and irritating you. I know in your family, originally it made people uncomfortable to even talk about it, right? Or they would deny your husband's pain when your husband was in pain, right? They would say, no, it's not a big deal. Like it's a phase. And they said the same about me. And our families make excuses for us, right? They don't want to see us in that state. Again, it has to be our decision to want to get help, because my parents tried so many times to get me help. And it wasn't until, like I said, something came over me and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I remember praying, like, God, is this my life? Like, is this what my life is going to be? My God and my universe and my higher power has shown me a whole different life. And I would never trade that for anything in this world.
Absolutely. I feel like the moment you said something came over you, it's that point of realizing that, do I want to live this life, or is it more uncomfortable to live this life or change? And I feel like I've seen that moment. I didn't get to see it for you, but I'm so glad I got to see this you, like all the deep down, beautiful TJ that is, I get to see now. The addiction hasn't taken over anymore, or that you've unlocked the handcuffs. And I always see it when I see it in my marriage. I remember just like one day, there was a day that I feel like I saw in my husband that it's more uncomfortable to be this way than change the one thing that I think I have control over. And I had nothing to do with that. I sometimes say very pompously, like, yep, like I'm helping you see the light. And I realize that it's not. It could be the rock bottom in someone's own head, that's not too bad to others, or someone could be literally on their deathbed. And I think it's just that point that is the key to the change. And you always told me that some people will be totally fine with drinking normally and they can do it the rest of their lives. They can have a bad moment and get on with it. But I think it's just the personal experiences that show you that you either need to live this way in a miserable state or get out and see the other side. I love that we get to, in our job, in our role, help families see that. And now we get to help our family see that to some extent, or just share our story. So it's empowering that there is a beautiful other side.
Yeah. And I love that you said, like, some of us need the rock bottom. Some of us need the ultimatum. Some of us need the catastrophic event to shake us. And I am so grateful that I had an event in my life that caused me to go down this level of pain so that I could come out on the other side a new person. And I am so grateful for every mistake I made, every failure I had, because it brought me to where I am today. And I think using, like you say, the failures in your past as your biggest strength is so powerful. And that's our goal here. It hasn't been easy staying sober. It hasn't been easy being in recovery, right? Like, it's a one day at a time process, and you constantly have to work on yourselves. And there's so much help out there. And I think the connection that you and I found in recovery is so beautiful. And I just wish that other people would find the same sort of relationship where they feel comfortable enough to share their truth and start their healing journey. So with that, here's to our healing, here's to our rising. And that's a wrap on another episode of Standing in Our Truth.